All right, fact check this podcast, and tonight I am joined once again by many friends of the show. We got Tyler Yonke, Craig Smoke, and Dag from the morning after. Guys, how's it going tonight?
Good.
How's it going?
So, actually, Dag, was it you or was it Clyde that shared this article in the morning after group chat? I thought it was.
I don't remember.
It might have been Clyde. And the headline is, it catches you right away. When localism becomes nationalism. And then when you read the opening line of the article, at the farmer's market, I found something I didn't expect. White supremacists. Now, I don't know why she didn't expect to find white supremacists at the farmer's market, but, we all make poor life choices, I guess. And what was really, really interesting about this is it's from ChristianCentury.org, so it's not like a normal leftist rag. Well, I don't know. Some of the I perused ChristianCentury.org, and I didn't see anything that was like super woke. But who knows? With the way modern Christianity is, maybe I'm completely wrong. So that was another interesting twist on this, is the Christianity aspect of it, and she talks about that some in the second half of the article. Let's get some like just general Cliff Notes ideas and thoughts on the article itself. Like, what were your expectations going in, and then as it progressed, what were you kind of thinking as you were coming through this thing?
Who do you want to go?
Anybody. It's open forum.
I'll start. First of all, if you click on at the bottom of it, there's some tags there. And if you click on one of them, which is white supremacy, it brings up a bunch of different articles. So I'm just talking about the subjective nature of this blog itself, or this website. The Rittenhouse verdict and the twisting of natural law. That's one of the articles in there. So you might be able to, and I checked that guy out, some lawyer, Gunnar Gunderson. He's a total woke snoke.
That's his name.
His name is Gunnar Gunderson,
and he looks Indian. So, but he's an IP attorney in down south. Doesn't matter. I clicked on that one to read it, and it cost me $4.95. So I said, "Fuck you," and I wasn't going to read it. My first take on it. First of all, when I looked at it, the first opening sentence is about Joel Salatin, and I don't know if you know much about him, but I know plenty. And so then I was already biased in this whole thing, knowing where it was going. There's been articles over and over and over about the white supremacy of the food market and this agricultural, little niche in there. So I knew exactly what it was going in, and it did not disappoint.
Didn't you say your wife subscribes to?
Oh, I found these. Yeah. So.
White supremacist.
No, this is the woke Mother Earth news. It's really good for your home garden people, trying to be sustainable ag and all this stuff. And this Joel Salatin, he's been on Tom Woods' show, by the way. He's a libertarian. His big crime, we could talk about all this, but his big crime was calling out this black guy who said, hey, his whole ideas about farming, being self-sustaining and making a business aren't possible. And Joel said, this guy's been farming for 6 years. What does he know? Now, this guy was a black Native American, so therefore he was racist. That's the racist thing that's what it is.
Wow.
So when you know that, and you could go down deep this hole with all this stuff, these are people. Okay, so here's what I found, and then I'll shut up and let the real people talk. Let's say you have a weird, obscure thing that you do. Mine is cycling, okay? But I really want to talk politics. So you try to find some way that your politics can be interspersed with this topic you actually know a lot about. That's what I found here. They want to talk farming, but they really want to talk racism. So they tried to mix the two, and this is what came out.
Yeah, I felt that it was really, they were really pushing it too. Like they wanted to address. What's going on? I heard something. They wanted to like um, address the farming thing, and it was like they were really stretching this whole racist narrative the whole time, and like even they tied in like Christian separatism, and they're like, there's these sects of Christianity that like these churches, these specific Catholic sects, not sects, not Catholic sects, but sects, that like break away and form their own communities of purity so they can live together in their own communities. And that sets a dangerous precedent because they're maintaining this ideology of purity. And when we venture down that road of ideology of purity, obviously that gets into purity of race. It's like you're like really stepping you're like jumping over a lot of steps to get from Christian separatism to racial segregation in like one sentence. And it's like, how do you put like the whole church, like every church that I know speaks on some form of purity. So are they all talking about like racial purity too? Because none of that like made any sense. It was very stretching to me.
The answer is yes.
Oh yes, absolutely.
That was when she was talking about that with the Catholic groups that have kind of broken off and are doing their own thing. One of the other parts that I thought was really interesting was she talks about how she just had this natural assumption that everybody at these farmers markets was incredibly progressive and
hippie.
More, the hippie farmers types and that they aligned with her like political ideologies just because they're environmentally conscious and they believe in taking care of the land that they farm and that they utilize and also because they believe in organic foods and healthy foods and stuff like that. So she automatically just assumed that all of these people were like incredibly progressive. And then this is the part that really made me think that it was probably something that she did, not something that any of them did, was when she talked about how leading up to the 2016 election, all of these people were Trump supporters, and she lost business because of her views on Trump. I would almost guarantee you nobody at that farmers market was talking about Trump or talking about politics or worried about any of that stuff until she started bringing it up.
Well, she didn't know their political leanings until she brought it up and they started leaving. So obviously she was the one that was pushing her bullshit in their face, not the other way around, because like you said, it wasn't up until that point that she's like, I started talking out against Trump and they started leaving. Well, she didn't even realize that there was, God forbid, conservatives in this group of local farmers. I don't know if you've ever met Midwest farmers. There's not too many liberal Midwest farmers. I live in Iowa. Likely. And when she was like, I didn't realize there'd be conservative people at the farmers market, I'm like, really?
She's in fucking Appalachia. Like, you should go in with the default that's probably what all of them. And in fact, if you're in Appalachia at a farmer's market, you should probably just go in with the assumption that everybody is probably a white supremacist, and then start weeding out the ones that aren't. Don't go in the other way around. Like that.
You're not in Oregon or something. And the other thing that stood out to me was, this is like kind of without meaning to, she's kind of proving the point that not every conservative hates the environment like the media likes to portray. Like we all just want to dig oil and destroy the environment and burn the world up. Obviously, I mean, she said all these people like are pro-environmentalist, pro like organic farming, pro sustainable farming, and but God forbid they're Trump supporters. How can that be? I think her mind probably melted when she realized there are Trump supporters that also are okay with protecting the environment.
But she was able to resolve that. And you know how she was able to resolve that? She
Racism.
talked about the mass shootings, right? The Christ Church guy, and she didn't mention Buffalo, but it was another one in El Paso, which you know, a lot of libertarians, right wingers, were pointing out at the time, these are environmental wackos on the left. And so she at least brought that out. It's part of their manifestos. You know, even Buffalo guy was kind of like that. But these other ones were very much. So that's how she then ties it in there. These people are they're Trump fans. Oh, and then they're part of this sect that's going on mass slaughtering people because they're fascist, and they're a weird sect of environmentalists. There was so much, you know, usually it's like you see someone, you're like, okay, they're just consistent on their ideology. I get it. And she was kind of like all over the board.
Oh,
but,
good God, yes.
But she did tie it with that, and then the pandemic, and that's what I was interested to see if there was going to be any comments about that. She mentioned COVID, and specifically, let's see here, the pandemic has made this especially clear as to those who opt self-determine and take the risk without consideration of broader consequences, driving up the infection rate and harm others. So she was fully on board with that. And I think if you look at this Joel guy, which I think triggers, if there's many articles across the internet about this guy, because he's very famous and he's outspoken. He's a self-professed libertarian. He spoke at the LNC convention in 2020. He's a capitalist. He's an environmentalist. He calls himself a lunatic. And the article that triggered everybody was called "White Fragility." No, that wasn't the one. Whining and entitlement. That's so he doesn't.
I like
punches.
already.
Yeah, exactly. What happened to our other buddy? He's having some technical problems, I guess.
So the big reason I want to dag on is because he and his wife actually like run booths at these farmers markets and sell all their stuff, and he's living this life, and I definitely wouldn't consider Jag a white supremacist. I don't know. He might lean a little bit more that way than your typical leftist, but he's definitely not like me or Mark Metz style white supremacist. So, you know, we can't. That's why we have him on the morning shows to balance us out.
What was her proof of white supremacy, though?
There was none. I saw absolutely nothing that proved white supremacy, other than so that actually takes us to where I wanted to go with it. Is what did y'all think of her definitions of and expectations of localism, and then she ties localism into it global, becoming nationalistic, and that's literally the only connection to white supremacy that she has through any of this, is that nationalism is now white supremacy because the left said so.
She said blood and soil.
I did think that was interesting, and we should definitely talk about Brexit, Sweden, and what's going on in Europe with some of this type of stuff too as we go. But what did y'all think about her overall explanation of localism and nationalism, and how did she get so far off?
How quickly can we like get you kicked off? Is that possible? I mean, we can try. So. First of all, her definition of localism is more like tribalism, which I don't see any real problem with tribalism, like self-preservation at the local level. But it was ironic the way she started out the article. It was like basically saying that corporate agriculture and corporate food industry can't keep up. That's why we have so much poverty, because the corporate level, basically the global food system cannot keep up at all levels. That's why we have extreme poverty. So that has to be met at a local level, and the local people know the needs of their local community, and they can provide for the needs of the local community. But then as she progressed towards the end, it turned into, well, localism cannot meet the needs of the local community, so that's why we need globalism, or like global food. It was like a complete 180 flip on it, and that was very confusing to me. And first, my question was, how the fuck can the local level not provide for itself? How can they not meet the needs at their own local level? If you're only specifically focused on your community, instead of sending like 90% of your crops to some big corporation, like an ethanol plant or a freaking overseas trade and stuff, there should be more than enough fucking food, at least in the United States, to feed ourselves. So that whole opinion that we can't feed ourselves is bullshit, in my opinion. The second thing being, we're all selfish and we're not good stewards and not Christians for only taking care of ourselves, and that forms tribalism, and obviously that's white supremacy. Well, you look at, I think it was just recently somebody came out with an opinion piece. I can't remember who it was. Some probably dumb white woman that was saying white people shouldn't shop at like Hispanic stores or like I don't know, ethnic stores because you're appropriating their cultural food. And it makes me wonder, like, I know there's no such thing as reverse racism, whatever. You can't be racist towards white people. But what's the difference between like a collective of Hispanics, like having their own community, having their own food source, having their own markets, or God forbid, I'm not even saying white people, but like farmers or whatever, like Midwesterners or like, I don't know, rednecks or something, like just focusing on their own community, not saying, hey, keep everybody out, but saying, hey, we're going to protect our own. Like, I just don't see what the difference is really.
And on the being able to feed ourselves, like the U.S. buys wheat from Ukraine, Russia, all over Europe every year. For some reason, the U.S. just like buys all this wheat,
and then we send ours over there, which makes no sense.
Right, and U.S. farmers like there are literally warehouses that sit for years until the wheat goes bad and just has to be dumped basically because we don't use it fast enough and we produce more than we need, and then for some reason we import a shit ton as well. It's fucking ridiculous. So yeah, I mean we could easily produce everything that we need easily, and actually, so I spent almost 10 years working in the grain industry. There's actually the biggest grain company in the U.S. is Japanese owned, and the
Really?
reason that Japan bought their own grain company in the U.S. was to ensure that they always have a food supply. That was it. Like at the end of the day, for that company, when it comes time to either sell grain to make money or send grain to Japan to feed people, they will absolutely send everything to Japan and feed their people and fuck everybody here. So like they took the steps to ensure their food supply, which I mean it's a brilliant tactic, and they paid me a lot of money for the years that I worked for them, so I'm not upset about it.
They are, for the Christians tuning in here, they are, since that's what we're looking at here, they are literally Joseph from the Old Testament. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
My take on the whole crazy lady here, I was looking back through it some more while you were talking there and about the localism stuff. I don't think she generally describes it incorrectly, because you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, we're against authoritarianism, central government, blah, 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 all this stuff. But then it's hard to mix in. So it's just, she's so woke and into her problematic politics of now these people that are now doing this farming, they're thinking of the inner cities as degenerates. She projects so much of her own problems and what she sees in this. It just goes from localism, goes to nationalism, goes to white supremacy, and it's really odd, and especially when you see more and more of. And by the way, that ties into the problematic issue with this Joel Salatin and this guy Chris Hammond, I think it was. I could get that name wrong. The guy that was having the racial accusations of race, where the guy that she first talks about here, is more into self-sustaining, taking care of yourself. And this other guy basically says, once again, you've got to be a little more woke, and why we're doing things locally and we want to be thought of as not big companies. We definitely want Big Brother, and we want co-ops, and we want all these other ideas of taking care of us. So, and by the way, I think, and we'll go into, I'm sure, the Brexit stuff here. I think her definitions of that are incorrect as well. I mean, I don't think there's polling to show that the reasons people were against Brexit was because they hated foreigners. By the way, I just want to say this again, that Joel Salatin guy, I'm sorry I'm stuck on him because I went down a deep rabbit hole today. He's from Venezuela. Okay, so he's not some white nationalist guy. He literally, his family were farmers there that came to the U.S., immigrated, and he's just not quite the right kind of immigrant. So
he took our jobs, and now he's living that multicultural white supremacy,
right,
that they've been telling us about.
Fair enough.
Well, yeah. One of the things that I kind of took issue with on this was when she really gets into her kick on localism and trying to tie localism to white supremacy and these like fringe groups, the alt-right and stuff like that, and into nationalism, which is, again, this is like the mainstream media definition of nationalism. When she's doing all of that, it really feels like she is trying to project her own opinions and views of what's good onto what localism should be. So like she wants localism to basically be like a nice big hippie commune where it's, peace, love, and everybody's free to come and go and do as you please, and it's like this big melting pot of horrible. Whereas like when I think of localism, I think of something more like a Mennonite or an Amish community, or stuff like that, like the more covenant community type of a thing, where it is a collection of like-minded people who are centered and focused on the same goals and the same things, and they generally want the same out of life. It's hard to make something work on an extremely local level if you have half a dozen conflicting ideas and views and people going in every different direction.
Well, communities are formed on like similar ideologies. At least they used to be. Like people got together. It's like, oh yeah, we all want this thing, or we're all like fishermen. Let's all just like form on this like area where there's a bunch of fish, and like that's what community is. Like I understand that America is diverse and there's a bunch of different ideologies and stuff, but you generally attract to similar ideologies, and that's not a race thing in my opinion. Because the thing that bothered me most was she was like, and even when you try to inject like to enhance diversity in that, it's still a localist mindset, so it's still racist. It's like, so if we put all these different cultures together but we're still focused on the local level, that's still somehow racist. That like none of this made any sense at all. That's why I texted you in the group chat. I was like, this whole thing made my freaking head hurt because it was
right.
so ironic. Like it was just filled with irony, the whole thing. But back to what I was saying, like I don't see where the issue, like why all of a sudden, why there's this big issue for people of similar ideology, similar like belief systems and stuff to band together. It's tribalism. And bad things have happened under tribalism. I understand that, but a lot of good stuff and a lot of freaking progression has occurred under similar mindsets getting together and working on a common goal.
Well, that's why I brought up like Mennonites and Amish and different types of communities like that. And
they move barns. They pick up barns and walk away with them.
I thought you brought that up because of your beard.
When you look at it, like you look at the things that those communities do, like they don't exclude people based on race or anything like that. Like there are different ethnicity of Mennonites and Amish. Like it definitely is more of a family thing, and it's like they're not super accepting of people, but at the same time, they don't, like, if people have genuine interest and come in good faith with sincere desire to be a part of that and to integrate themselves into that, they don't turn them away. And even like the Mennonite communities back home, they let people who aren't part of the community come in and go to and attend church with them and be there like on the farm and stuff. So like these are like the most extreme versions of localism in the way that she would probably define it as leaning towards white supremacy. If you do look at those communities, they are 99.99% white, but they're not exclusive. They're not like white supremacists. They don't think that they don't go towards that purity the way that she twists purity when you get into the later half of this, where she's talking about like Christian purity and stuff, and somehow linking purity to meaning white supremacy and ethnic purity.
But do you think? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you think a culture such as the Amish or the Mennonites? Do you think like we would consider, like, people would consider them kind of like behind in the times, I guess. But I mean, they get a lot more shit done than we do. But do you think a culture like that would survive as long as it did, how it is, if it didn't have a sense of protectionism towards its community, towards its ideologies, where they're a little bit more protective of it? It's not that they don't accept people in, but if you're in their community, you kind of follow their standards and their, maybe not their beliefs, but you're going to do their, I don't know, you're going to work
Well,
the
that's
way
what
they
you've
work.
seen historically is anytime a community opens itself up, like, I mean, this is throughout history. Whenever a community opens itself up and starts allowing other outside things to infiltrate into it and start to change what made it what it was, it always falls apart. It always crumbles. Like
So now you're advocating for the overturning the 19th Amendment. Is that what I hear you saying?
always.
Okay. just checking to see how this is going.
That's
I think you're thinking of the 13th, but I'm actually okay with the 13th. But yeah, the 19th's got to go.
It's a few things. One, and maybe this is an end question, but I'll definitely forget it if we talk about it when we get to the end. Is what's her solution? I did not really. She's having this problem. She's coming up with. I did not really get a solution. So I don't know how old she is, but I guarantee you, because I've been going to these things. I'm much older than you guys, and I've been going to these markets. You know, I lived in Boulder, very progressive town for years. There's all these kind of markets. They were inundated with Che Guevara type hippies, right? Those communities and that tribe was a horrible mess. That I'm sure she wasn't complaining about that. But when and the right, we would go to the markets too. They love these things. They just don't complain. They don't really give a shit. They're just buying their food and they're moving on. Now, the right or even libertarians are speaking out. Maybe they're saying, you know, I don't like your don't give corn to a Nazi bumper sticker or whatever you put in on your stupid thing there. And they're saying, they're calling you on your bullshit. Now everyone's a white supremacist, and she gets to use that term because everyone can use it now. And it's really to just so you don't have to listen to these people. But once again, I don't know her solution. Maybe you guys saw it in there.
I figured out what the solution is, and it's that she should just shop at Whole Foods and stay away from the farmers markets. Yeah, she definitely doesn't present anything as a solution to it. There's nothing. So she identifies like these lofty ideas of white supremacy and nationalism that are going on at these farmers markets, but she doesn't give any specifics as to what makes it that, other than the fact that these are.
What's the problem with that? What's the problem with, let's say, a white supremacist is giving you his corn cob, right? What's the
well, and that kind of takes us to the stuff that she talks about in the Brexit stuff, and then in Sweden. So Sweden is an interesting case study on nationalism, kind of the type of nationalism that they're talking about, kind of becoming mainstream. So Sweden had this policy of just taking in tons and tons and tons of immigrants, and it really started to fuck up their culture. It started to really change what Sweden was, especially around like Stockholm and some of the big cities. And it really pushed people. Number one, it pushed people to leave cities and become more rural. And then it also pushed the people who are in the cities towards a more legitimate type of white supremacist type nationalism, where they see all of these people just being brought in, like literally by the boatloads, and it's completely changing everything about their culture, and not for the better. At least as not as far as they're concerned, but also like generally speaking, not for the better. Crime rates have shot through the roof. Like there's all kinds of problems that have come out of this since they've started doing this. So now you see the Nordic resistance movement, which she refers to as a neo-Nazi group, but I'm not saying that Nazism wasn't a bad idea. Like they definitely had some pretty bad ideas, but the reason that it came to be was because of the Weimar Republic and everything that led up to World War II. Like there were things that created the situation that brought that on. And you see similar things creating that situation in Sweden, which has brought on these groups that are now being labeled as neo-Nazi because they are more nationalistic. It's not because they're not neo-Nazi because they're suggesting that they should be rounding up all of the Muslim immigrants and putting them in ovens or anything. It's because they are more nationalistic, and that's really becoming prevalent in Sweden. And then she talks about, like, when you meet these people in real life, they're not their media image. They're nice, they're talkative, they offer you good food. Like, these are the ones who are talking about the dangers of fast food and not eating over processed shit, and getting back to nature and returning to organic, stuff that's done the right way. Like, there's an interesting blend of what's going on with these groups that she for some reason just didn't expect, I guess.
Yeah, that was the part that caught me too, where she's like, yeah, it turned out all these racists were really nice and stuff, and they didn't spew hate and racial stuff. And I to your point, what was her like solution? I don't think there was a solution. I think, like I said at the beginning, she shows up to this thing that she thinks is a hippie commune because they all support the environment, realize there's like right-wing people there that support the environment, and her brain just kind of exploded, and then she let it explode onto a piece of paper or onto her computer screen. And that's what we got out of this article. Like, it was just a bunch of just nonsense, just vomited all over a screen. Like, well, I ran into a racist because he was a Trump supporter, and their nationalistic views, and that's obviously white supremacy. But I mean, to their defense, they were really nice white supremacists. I don't understand. They're not what the media portrays. So, but on the other hand, they were separatists, which means they're white supremacists. And the thing that bothers me about people like this is, like, I mean, you're going to find racist people everywhere you go. It's shocking. I know. But the thing is, if you don't know they're racist, who fucking cares? Who really, if that person has racist tendencies or like a racist mindset, like, take, for example, Randy Weaver of Ruby Ridge, conspiracy theory bullshit. Like, he dealt in white supremacist groups. He like went to Aryan Nation meetings and stuff, and he was always asking questions. Yes, he even claimed, yes, I am racist. I'm not a hate. Like, he came out after the whole Ruby Ridge thing, and he was like, I'm not one of these hateful racists that wants like other people to die and shit. He's like, I just have my own opinion, like separatist opinions, and that's why I moved to a fucking mountain to get away from everything, so I didn't have to deal with. And it's like, I don't see a problem with that. If you don't like colored people, fine, and you want to go live away from them on your own, fine. If you're not wanting to kill people, fine. Who fucking cares? If you don't know that a person is racist, if you show up to a farmer's market and you're like, oh, there's racist people here, but I can't figure out which ones are racist, then what's the goddamn problem?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the great thing about, as we probably all agree here, the wonders of the market. They're accentuated with a farmer's market like this. And if some black guy isn't selling you something, or you're not selling him something, that's going to, it's going to spread, and everyone's going to know right away. And you're not going to be able to hawk your wares unless, maybe your wares are Nazi propaganda. I don't know. So, it's once again, I think you're talking about her brain breaking. She had an agenda, and then she wanted to write an article to support that, of what things she had. One, she wasn't very accepting of other people not suddenly being in her little idea, so she has to, call them names in a sense. And I think it's what's interesting.
Was anybody even aside? Sorry to cut you off, but like, aside,
I was going to crescendo right there.
Aside from the handful of people who stopped doing business with her over her anti-Trump sentiments in 2016, like, did anybody actually push back against her? Like, I don't see anywhere, because if they did, like, if she actually had people come after her over something, or like she experienced real exclusion, or even saw real white supremacy, like, I guarantee you there would be at least 4 paragraphs entirely dedicated to
Well,
talking about that.
let me read the paragraph here. She said, but this talks about the Trump stuff. She goes, but then more people I knew who were involved in sustainable practices came out as pro-Trump and anti-immigrant, which might have just said, hey, let's have some border security. I don't know. I'm astonished by growers who reviled Muslims and spread hateful slander by refugees while selling their heirloom varietals and have been developed in Latin America and Middle Eastern nations. But I bet she was all for closing down the country and doing a full-sale ban on travel during COVID, and probably wanted a vaccine mandate for everybody as well. So,
yeah. So she, the only person that I gather here that is so like single-minded that wants everybody to believe what they want to believe in that community is her. Like she's more tribalistic than they are. They're willing to come to this this kind of melting pot of like, you got liberal hippies, you got like conservative farmers and stuff just selling and making a dime off it and then living off the local produce. But she's the only one there that's like, everybody here has got to think like me and be in my mindset. It's like, so who's the tribalist here?
Well, I'm disappointed this was written in 2021 and not after Roe v. Wade, because she would have mentioned something about some sort of a back farmers market abortions or something like that. My crescendo that I wanted to get to was she writes about Christianity and Catholicism, and I see this way too much. I don't know what your guys' religious beliefs are, but I'm a Christian, and I see this with they have a religious belief, but their real sacrosanct in their belief is the state. Or politics. And to me, this is really where she digs in here. Otherwise, she would, just keep it to more of the Christianity thing and accepting these white supremacists as part of, God's people and trying to bring them in and change their minds, as that one black guy did with the KKK. But, that's her real religion is something else besides Catholicism. That's my getting at.
I think that is kind of the crux of modern religion. I've actually talked about it a couple times on different episodes. Like what passes for Christianity in today's society and today's culture is not even remotely close to what Christianity is supposed to be. It's this politically driven, progressive idea of like the buddy Jesus image, and it's a perversion of what Christianity and principles and faith are supposed to be all about. And yeah, so you get into that where she's talking about these Catholic communities and stuff like that, and like for some reason she seems to think that any form of natural segregation is white supremacist. Is basically the way that's kind of the way it reads to me. It's like these people chose to go do this thing together. So because they're all white, that means they're white supremacists. They excluded, but they didn't exclude anybody. They just
happened most of the people there were white in that community. And
I would be willing to bet that if there were black people that wanted to come with them, or there were Mexicans who wanted to come with them, or God forbid, even if there were like Muslims who wanted to come with them and be a part of that community, if they were on board with the ideals and the principles and the things that those people in that community wanted, and they were similarly aligned in the goals of the community, they would have been welcome. Like more often than not, when you see segregation happening in nature, it's more of a because the other ones don't ask to come along, not because not the ones who are segregating themselves said, no, you can't come. It's because nobody asked, hey, can we come?
I think, look, it's once again, it's kind of like there's a problem, and as she sees it, which is kind of undertones here, which is black people aren't represented. That's the Mother Earth, whatever it is, news. They were trying to be more now diverse, and so having people of color, BIPOCs or whatever it is, come in and write for them. Now, okay, so if that's the problem, is it now incumbent on the farmers that they're the racists for preparing food and having farms because they're all white? Is it the problem though of the black people and others that minorities that aren't actually getting involved in that themselves? So what do you do when you have? It's like snow skiing. Okay, there's not enough black snow skiers or swimmers. What are we going to do about that?
You
Is it the
throw them in
problem
the
of
river
this?
and make them swim.
Yeah, is it the
That doesn't
problem of the people who are actually doing it and the associations, or is it the problem that they're all coming from the inner city, which is we go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson and Johnson and stuff like that. So to me, I think that's an issue, and I don't know what it's. They like to walk around that and blame. It's weird to blame kind of the farmers market people for. I mean, we don't have enough black farmers, I guess. What do we do about that? Is
We
that
go
really
in
something
and snatch them up and force them into the fields, I guess. That's
Right.
the only solution.
But there was a lot more back in the 18 something.
Yeah, I feel we tried that. I feel like we tried that before and it didn't work out so well.
No, but evidently she's for it. I don't know.
I mean, arguably it was working out fine until people decided to start fighting about it.
Right. Cotton. I mean, Eli Whitney wouldn't have came up with the cotton gin if it hadn't worked out so well.
We're a bunch of white supremacists for sure.
A lot of progress was made.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. I don't know. Our chickens are still producing white eggs.
Oh God.
Some of them are colored though. We do have
a few colored eggs.
We have
out
4
there.
black chickens, by the way.
Oh, I'm getting the diversity.
Right. One's
Quota
called
in there.
Wheezy. We have Diamond and Silk. I don't know what the other one's called.
I say wait until your black chickens start laying green eggs, and then you'll just be completely confused.
Yeah, you look at their feet, and that's the color that the eggs are. By the way, that's the clue.
Oh, did not know that.
So we get a lot of brown and green eggs. I don't have
Yeah.
many white eggs around our
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, this whole thing just makes my brain hurt so bad.
So let's get into some of her tying it back to Christianity to kind of start to wind it down a little bit.
Did we go to the Brexit stuff?
Oh yeah.
Well, I kind of breezed past Brexit and went straight into Sweden nationalism, which is my own fault just because. See, now I got to find the website. There's like a alt right. It's not even alt right. Like it's extreme right Swedish website that it is funny as shit. I don't know if it's deliberately funny or if that's just the way they report the news, but it is amazing and like in all the best ways. Like they're super nationalistic.
They have a lot of that over there, right? Over in Europe, right? And so I wonder if it's because you have such a homogenous society, and then suddenly you have a massive influx of like Middle Eastern or whatever immigration that they have, that it causes this not diverse, but it causes this divide in the country more, or what? And I know their left right is, I would say it's a little different than ours.
So there are there are a lot of studies that have been done on it because you have seen it a lot. It did to some extent drive Brexit, like you were getting at earlier. Like that's Brexit didn't happen because all of the English countryside decided to be a bunch of white supremacists, but it did definitely play at least some, not the white supremacy, but the mass influx of immigrants played some role in that decision. You've seen it in France, where I don't know how Macron won this time around. Like the opposition to him was insane, and he still managed to win. You're seeing it in Italy, the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark. It is more and more prevalent across Europe and across the European Union that they've had this big influx of Germany. Germany is a great example. There's a whole lot of nationalistic, like really strong nationalist movements going on in Germany that could really upset their political structure and kind of turn the country back in more of a Nazi Germany type of direction, which because they're doing a lot of the same things that were happening at the time that Germany turned to Nazi Germany. Like, if you don't learn from the past, it's doomed to repeat itself.
The printing press and just driving their market, their dollar down and everything. Or
like you're seeing it playing out all throughout Europe, where
well, countries are realizing, people of countries are realizing, when we're not looking after our own, we kind of get the shaft in the end of it. And then all of a sudden, it's like a cycle thing. It's like, well, we got to be more inclusive. We got to be more global, like global minded and stuff. And then it comes to find out, or like a war happens in Russia and Ukraine, and then we get fucked over here. It's like, maybe we got to look out for ourselves a little more. Maybe we got to get somebody in office that has our interest at hand, because the Germans, how many articles, headlines have you seen that Germans are afraid of freezing this winter because they know that the energy crisis is just going to like multiply exponentially? I mean, you got like
firewood was trending on German Twitter yesterday, because people are trying to find firewood so they can keep warm, because they know they're not going to have gas.
Yeah. So people's self-interest drives nationalism, localism, then that inevitably drives nationalism, because it's like, I don't want to freaking freeze to death or starve to death this winter. So I want somebody that's going to look out for my interests. And on the other hand, what countries are have more national protectionism than the blatant communist countries out there? Like what countries, what capitalist countries are more self-centered than like communist China, what's the other one? Like Venezuela, like those like what country? North Korea. What countries are more internally protectionist than communist countries? So when you get the same people that are touting communism and globalism, it's like, look at the communist countries, because they are like, they have global markets, but they are the most self-centered, like protect their own countries out there.
So another interesting thing in this topic, and talking about being really protectionist, I've spent, like I said before, I've spent too much time kind of looking at the Sweden thing and what's going on in Sweden. Prior to Sweden bringing in like a whole bunch of Middle Eastern immigrants, you had to go through an application process to move to Sweden. Like, you could go and stay on like a work visa or a tourist visa for a couple months, but then once your visa was over, you had to get the fuck out. Like, you had
to leave for like 3 months before you could come back. I remember.
They're like, okay, cool, thanks for visiting, now go away and don't come back for a while. And if you wanted to like actually move there and live there, it was a like literally years process, and you had to go through applications, and you had to be able to prove that you had a job, that you had to prove a minimum income. Like, it wasn't like you're showing up like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna work at McDonald's and make $7.25 an hour. Like, you had to prove minimum income, or they were not letting you in. There was a huge application process, and then so they were very protectionistic in the way that they structured their society, and it worked really well. And then they threw it all out and just started bringing in immigrants with none of that whatsoever, and it's completely wrecked, or for a time and to a extent, it completely wrecked their society. And they've done a lot over the last several years to kind of course correct and right that, but there's still some lingering effects of that you see, and that's why you get some of these like nationalistic pushes, and why they become very popular, because people are seeing it and being loud about it, and then the other people who don't want to be loud about stuff are also seeing that, and then they start to quietly back it, and then it gains momentum.
And I'm sure, look, we have the United States is vast, right? But yet we have all these states, and Texas has a lot of pride. All these little different states have their pride. So I take those states and I move that to Europe, and it's probably even more so with different languages, right? So now, if let's say, well, we kind of have that with dialects in the U.S., but you can understand that. And so when you start to have states or little countries, small regional countries, immigrate, and they're seeing everything changing, and it's, once again, we talk about the homogeneity of this. I think that does then it's easy to rile up a whole group of, the countrymen basically of like, whoa, what's happening here? By the way, back to this lady, she said Brexit likely never would have happened were it not for the spirit of hostility to and fear of the outsider, specifically the UK's diverse immigration population. She doesn't have proof of anything. She likes to do these declarative statements with no real backing up, which is always a problem to me. I'm sorry, I'm just a little scattered on that, but there you go.
Yes. I mean, that's a very shallow, single-minded take on why Brexit happened. I guess at its core, it's back to the people wanted what was best for their best interest, and to stay in the European Union didn't seem like it had their best interest. And so they wanted to split away from that. Whether that stemmed from immigration, probably some. But the key to look at here is if your people think, hey, you're not looking out for me, then like for example here, how many times, I mean, they call us a representative democracy or whatever. How many times does something get passed and you're like, I had no interest in that whatsoever? Yeah, it's just like, what happened to a representative? You're not representing me in any way, shape, or form. And so once especially smaller countries like that, it's more like, I don't know, it's more like in your face, because it's not like our country's so spread out that there's so many different ideologies that it's easier to pinpoint what's not working for your country, what's not working for this group of people, when it's a small like state-sized country like Britain, where it's just like, yeah, the union voted for this and that's not working out for that'd be like Texas saying, this energy bill is not working out for us, we're not voting for it. We want to secede. How many times do you hear Texas saying they want to secede anyway? It's the same thing. It's not a racist thing. It's a we want to look out for our own people, whether that's white people, who knows? I don't know. But if it's not working out for our people, we don't want anything to do with it.
One of my good friends lived in France for like 10 years. He just came back. He lives in DC. He's kind of a lefty, but I had a conversation with him, and he's talked about France, and they're very nationalistic. I mean, if you're Anglo at all, I mean, you get it's bad, right? So you don't want France dictating what's going on in Brexit in the UK, and the UK doesn't want what's going on in there. They don't want these things back and forth. Imagine if we could have a national divorce that all that we had to do was vote for it, like Brexit. That would be fantastic.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah,
right.
But then, so I understand why they did it. No offense, the EU isn't something that's been on for hundreds of years. It just came out, what, in the 90s, was it? 2000 something?
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. I guess it was in the planning stages in the late 90s and actually came to fruition in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like it's some long-standing thing, and arguably, like, they talked about all the things that whenever that was happening, there were articles and stuff that talked about all the things that Britain was going to be missing out on, losing out on if they left the European Union, and they don't seem to be any worse for the wear.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem you would have over there is the ability to easily travel like we do between states, right? So, over there, it's an easy thing, and using the euro rather than the pound and da-da-da-da-da. But, the ease of using your phone and credit card, I think it just makes all those excuses wane. So who knows? I haven't been there for a while.
One part that stood out to me, and this is separate from what we've been talking about, I just wanted to point this out. The part that stood out to me was when she said that the fear of globalism is just anti-Semitism, like hidden, like shrouded anti-Semitism, because globalists, I mean, is she calling all global leaders Jewish? And is that her calling it that? Because
words like globalist are often deployed as a dog whistle for Jewish, as a covert anti-Semitic slur. Localism as a defense of Western values, or as a preservation of white Western civilization as some kind of fundamentally superior society is shorthand for white supremacy.
Yeah, every time I've mentioned I hate globalism, I've never had in my mindset I hate freaking Jewish people. It's just
Right.
never
If I'm going
been
to say
the thought.
fuck the Jews, I just say fuck the Jews. I don't
Right.
shroud it in talking about globalism.
Yeah, it's like people saying "Let's go, Brandon" to cover up that. No, I'm just gonna say "fuck Joe Biden" if I want to say it. But I don't see. I get that the anti-globalist movement, I mean, has kind of evolved out of that anti-Jewish set, like the Jews run the banks and the Jews run Hollywood. I get that it probably started that way, but anymore, I don't think you could pin globalism on one people group. And if anybody's pinning it on the Jews, it would be her by making that statement, I would think.
She does tie it in with a Pope Francis comment, but I'm not Catholic, so she can go fuck herself.
Well, I did find her solution. Her solution is that it's important to center.
Is it the final one? Sorry.
It's important to center. I almost said the final. To center non-white leaders in local food movements and take advantage of opportunities for global collaboration. Like that's kind of the antithesis of the local.
Yeah. How do you have a global farmers market? I like how she's like, well, I get seeds from Ukraine and I get my tomato plants from Brazil, and it's just like, okay, fucking good for you. Who cares?
But that's not a farmer's market. That's a grocery store.
Yes, that's not local farming at that point. If you want to procure your seeds online and buy them off Amazon, great, good for you. You're saving the world one Amazon order at a time, I guess. But
yeah, she's a little more into the hippity dippity shit. Like the people that I know that do like the real growing their own stuff type of thing, like they're saving seeds from the stuff that they grew this year to grow more stuff next year. They're not ordering it from Ukraine and Brazil, and they are cultivating their own seeds so that next year they can plant their own. Like they're practicing actual self-sufficiency. She's practicing what's the white suburban housewife version of growing your own food. Like, all right, I'm gonna order my seeds from Amazon, and then I'm gonna plant them in these little planters that I ordered from Amazon, and then I'm gonna package it all up in these nice little boxes that I ordered from Amazon. Then I'm gonna go set it all out on the.
Does she want some sort of like ethnic? She wants a central planned, locally central planned, some sort of farmer's market that's controlled by a foreigner, right, or something like that.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, she wants to make sure that that the global elites are able to keep our local farmers markets diverse. And
now you said global elites. That's dog whistle for anti-Semitism.
Yeah, right. The Jews.
Hey, here's the dumb part. If every time my wife goes to these all the time, we have one here locally, but each one of these little places they're selling at a farmer's market. It's conveniently done, but these are farms, right? So you can see right there they use your phone. You can pay for it and everything, but it says here's where my farm is. So if they're going to be excluded because they're whites, just go to their fucking farm, or you can order it and have it delivered. So this farmer's market is nice, but once again, the market's going to make these white supremacists. I'm still going to want my corn cobs from my white supremacist or however it's going to be done.
I mean, white supremacists put out the best corn cobs. You got to admit.
I've never been cornhole. I don't know. Something like that.
Something
as
like
good
that.
as when a white supremacist does it. Yeah. I live in Northern California. All these are foreigners. I mean, it's crazy.
Let's say so. So, what did we think of the article overall, and what's the actual solution to?
Well, the Christian thing, the true Christian thing would be to globalize the local farmers and
Global,
Like-
convert him to
So
Judaism.
this is something
Is that
I
what
wanted to
just
hit up.
heard?
This is something I did want to hit on because she does bring Christianity into it. Like the early Christian church was, they were very welcoming of people and they were very helpful to people, but they were also an incredibly closed community because they were literally being persecuted and murdered. So like they were not they weren't exactly all about like inclusivity and stuff like that. Like they were pretty tight and pretty exclusive. And there are plenty of scripture that even backs that, like, you should kind of do the covenant community type thing. And like if you have people who are coming in that are coming in bad faith and that are bringing things that are going to damage the culture and the beliefs and the faith and the values of what you're doing, you need to get rid of those people. Like that. This is scriptural. It's not just like Hoppe saying, physical removal. Like it's scriptural to keep those types of people out of your community.
It's the biblical version of "Don't water down the brand."
Yeah.
Yeah. I like how she ties in basically the whole go into the world type, like reach the whole world is the Great Commission in the Bible, like go into the world. But she tied that back to, and a lot of the left ties biblical like Jesus movement or whatever, the disciples, into communism, because you're looking out for the elderly, you're looking out for the children, you're feeding the needy and stuff. But the thing people don't understand is that was communism at a localized level. It was like voluntary, like people of the same ideologies, as we mentioned earlier in the show, coming together with the same belief system and protecting their own. It was very much tribalism in that aspect, but it wasn't like Jesus wasn't like Jesus said feed the hungry. He didn't say, hey, give your money to Caesar to feed the hungry and force some sort of whatever political communism on them. And then she comes back to, well, the whole scripture is based on global reach. And it's like you're really, really stretching what you're saying here to make it fit this mindset that you have. You're stretching Christianity, again, watering down the brand to fit this whole idea of, I don't know what we want to call it if we can't call it globalism, because that's anti-Semitic.
Yeah, well,
the religious part, well said, actually, Craig. Some of the religious parts, and I've been bothered by this for some time, which is you have a movement. It's been last 100 years where we've taken churches out of taking care of people to the government now does it. Even Rothbard, and for New Liberty, I think he talked about the Mormon Church, which I'm not a Mormon either. Talked about the Mormon Church and their ability to take care of community, and a lot of that stuff is taken away. I don't think she has that as her solution here. So I'm bothered by a lot of the Christianity stuff that she has, because it's garbage. I mean, even the Bible says, tax collectors are sinners and other awful people. I believe that in full force. I also believe in taking care of your community and being a Christian in that aspect. And, the one great thing, which I've said here about, which is we're talking about farmers market, but the market itself is, it will, if you need something and someone else has it and you have to exchange for it, you're going to be out there with these people. If they're white supremacists, they're not going to be white supremacists for long. And they're, by the way, they're not. She has no proof that that's the case. These are just right-wing people who love to sell their goods, and they will gladly do it for you. And you know what? If you have a conversation with them, you're going to win hearts and minds through the conversion of the dollar in exchange for your corn cobs. Well, I don't know why I'm stuck on that. But
you are stuck on your corn cobs.
I need some help.
with the globalist mentality, I think there is a lot of emphasis on traditional transactional type stuff, and what you'll see with these farmers markets is there are connections that are made. And so, I have eggs, and you have tomatoes, and that guy over there has cows, and
yeah.
You make those connections and you build those communities locally, where I'll give you 3 dozen eggs if you'll give me a bucket of tomatoes and or a couple gallon of milk, or like we can make exchanges where I have the things that you need and you have the things that I need, and we can move stuff around. Where a lot of this for this we keep going back to the word, but a lot of this globalist stuff to work, it has to be in the traditional transactional manner, because it has to be taxed, it has to be recorded, it has to be documented. You have to be able to see who does what and when and where and why and how, and when you start to become extremely local, then you start to cut all of that out, and that's then you can't have the forced homogenization. Like that's the ultimate goal, is for it to just be this giant melting pot where you can't tell anybody apart. I think that's the some of the push for like the transgender stuff and everything else is, and the inclusivity and diversity and all of that is, they want it to be this giant canvas of everything is completely different, but it's all exactly the same. Like it's diversity with no diversity whatsoever. Ultimately, you are just one of billions and not yourself.
But what they're coming to find out is when you force this homogenization, if that's the word, that's when people like kind of pull back and build those barriers. It's like when it comes down to what we're saying, the local level, where it's just like, I mean, we talk in dollars and cents, or we talk in like transactions. It's like, I don't think there's any farmers markets out there that's going to be like, we don't serve your kind around here, and like turn down $1, turn down like some black guy comes up, is like, hey, I'll give you $50 for this. They're not going to be like, I'm sorry, we don't serve blacks around here. We're not going to take your money because it's dirty black money. I don't think that's the case anymore. Even if they are racist at the core, or some guy comes up and offers them money, they're going to take the money. But and when you're in those settings, like people just get along because they kind of have to for a community to work. But then when you start coming in and forcing different ideologies on these people, that's when they pull back and they entrench themselves in their ideologies. That's why, like I was saying with the European countries that are going more nationalistic, it's like you're attacking their best interest, and then they are pulling back harder and entrenching themselves more on their protectionism. Like, no, we got to take care of our own. And you see that with, I don't know, more racial tendencies when you start, or racist tendencies. It's like when you start saying, no, you got to adhere, or whatever, phobias, whatever, homophobias, or whatever they're calling them these days. It's like, you gotta support what they believe. You got to support, like your morals have to fit their morals, and then people are pulling back. It's like, no, I don't agree with that. I'm going to entrench myself harder into it. So that's why they are finding so much more problems with, like racism or homophobia or whatever, because they're trying to force it in your face, and people are like, I don't agree with this. When it's just people transacting with each other, not sharing their beliefs or whatever, just dollars and cents in transactions. It's just like, we'll just get along together.
And by the way, that's exactly that whole, when we started this with in the article started with Joel Saladin and this Chris kid. Joel, in his remarks, he's like, look, I'm going to push back against this guy's assumption that, my farm does X, Y, and Z, so many cows per whatever. And he's like, he's got a bunch of facts wrong. He goes, the mere fact I'm going to push back, I'm going to be called a racist, and I don't care. Which is interesting, because nothing he says is racial. He just says, this guy is so woke, and that's his focus, that I'm going to be, vilified, but for that. I had something else, and I don't remember. It's just right past me.
Well, I was just about to ask, do we have anything else? I feel like we covered all of the big bases I wanted to with this. We had a little bit on the definitional stuff of localism and nationalism. We talked a little bit about the Christianity aspects of it, got into Brexit and Sweden. And
I did want to, now it came back to me, which is her stuff is a lot of it's anecdotal, right? And then she tries to progress that out to everything else. But if, like where I'm at, Northern California, we have all kinds, you go to a farmer's market, it's just not white people. There's Asians, there's Mexicans, all kinds. And now we know, I don't know if she's aware of this, but certain ethnic groups are really racially, they don't like other ethnic groups in some sorts. And that's not brought out in this. So there's a white supremacy and then there's an Asian supremacy. And without going into too much detail, yet they seem to still, sell their wares and goods too. So whatever, lady.
And so there are other groups that are a lot more exclusionary than white people, even than like the white supremacists. So.
Or the globalists.
But if you bring that up, if you even mention that, you're a white supremacist. It's like
right, for noticing.
It's like, well, what about the Asians? Because I mean, I don't know any people group more protectionist than Asians. And like you were talking, Japanese
first or second generation, Asian girl, and see what her dad says.
Yeah, like Justin, you were talking about the Asian farm company that's like when the shit hits the fan, all that shit's going back to Asia to protect their own. I mean, try to be a white person and be like, well, when the shit hits the fan, I'm feeding all my white buddies over here, and then fuck the rest of y'all. Yeah, you're a white supremacist. But if you call out that, if you even dare to say, man, Asians are way more protectionist than white people, then you're a white supremacist for just saying that.
Right.
I think I should do an episode where we just take a list of random things and is it white supremacy? And the answer is yes to all of them.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, guys, give your plugs and we'll wrap up.
I'm Tyler. Find me on Twitter. I do the Libertarian Podcast Review. We're doing another Kill podcast episode coming up this next week. So anybody out there want to come on, talk about your podcast or your wife or your chickens, I don't care. Let me know and we'll put you on.
Perfect.
That's it.
All right. I'm Craig. I host the Break the Bell podcast. My handle is @BreakTheBellPod. We just break down what's going on in the world and expose bullshit for bullshit, I guess. What we usually take an anti-globalist approach to all our episodes, which I guess now makes me an anti-Semite. So I guess now I'm the anti-Semitic Break the Bell podcast.
As well, you should be. And be sure to go find the new Break the Bell on YouTube and subscribe to it because I jinxed the last one and got it nuked.
You did.
Are you anywhere else, Craig?
I'm all over the podcast platforms. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all the social media is the handles @BreakTheBellPod. But yeah, you can find me on any podcast platform, Spotify, iTunes, everything.
I'm 2 for 2. I got the Peddling Fiction YouTube channel nuked, and then I got yours nuked. So somehow I haven't gotten my own nuked yet. I guess I play this one a little more close to the vest.
It's funny because I didn't even get nuked for your episode. You just commented, this one will get you nuked. And then like 2 days later, I was nuked.
Called it. Well, thanks, guys. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Be sure to tune back in on Wednesday, where I will be back with a brand new episode where I talk about probably globalism, because I'm not a big fan of Jews. All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, Justin.